Hey, true crime fans, welcome back to For Criming Out Loud. This is our bedtime series called Crime Me to Sleep, and we've been reading While Idaho Slept. This is the 13th episode, so if you are new here, make sure to subscribe so you can go into the playlist and start the book from the beginning. Let's get into episode 13 of While Idaho Slept. Part 10, Chapter 55. Xana Kernodle's funeral in Post Falls was officiated by her former gymnastics coach, Todd McLean, serving as pastor for the proceedings. The intimate ceremony began with the singing of the first stanzas of an 8th century hymn, Be Thou My Vision. Anyone who knew the entirety of that lyrical call to God might have appreciated that the later stanzas weren't sung. Be thou my battle shield, sword for the fight. Xana's farewell wasn't the place for invoking more violence in the world. A good name is better than fine oil, McLean began his brief sermon, quoting Ecclesiastes, and the day of death is better than the day of one's birth. There were sniffles from the attendees. Outside, the nearby Coeur d'Alene Mountains were collecting new snowfall, and the Spokane River ran cold and crisp as it swelled through the turns in the snow-muffled forest. When a child is born, we can be happy for the parents, and we can be excited about the potential for the child, but we don't have memories to look back on, McLean explained earnestly. We don't have the experiences that can bring us joy when we reminisce on them. But rather, today, we can share memories of our dear friend, and these memories can bring us a measure of comfort. And that is what Xana's mourners did. They told stories, with McLean taking the lead. I know a few days after I found out what happened to Xana, my daughter and I were sitting at our place of business and talking about it, he said, fighting against tears. We were struggling. We'd been glued to the news just like all of you have been. We were wanting the answers. We were angry at times, felt sad at times, confused, felt empty inside, felt like we had been kicked in the stomach and the nauseating feeling just wouldn't go away. His breath was audibly catching. But then my daughter brought up a memory, he said. When Xana and his daughter Sydney were in grade school, they had tried to become Instagram and YouTube famous by producing video content about their daily lives, like the Kardashian family, who had built their brand on just being their quirky selves. McLean played Xana and Sydney's first effort for the mourners. The two girls on the screen couldn't stop laughing long enough to finish filming. My name is Xana. I'm 12 years old. And then the giggles. The sound of Xana as a young girl crackled in the air. It was a hard sound for her mourners to hear, but there was a noticeable lightening of the room, too. Xana had been alive, after all, and in her life there had been laughter. Through technology, it transcended the passing of nearly a decade, and it transcended the darkened passages that her loved ones had been roaming without her in the weeks since her murder. By the time Xana's older sister, Jasmine, spoke to the mourners, the mood was still lifting. In describing their childhood together, Jasmine said, "One time she threw a roller skate at my shoulder." She laughed. It seemed to good-naturedly sum up their relationship. Xana had been wild and fun, Jasmine recalled, and while the two had fought like cats and dogs growing up, by the time they were both in college, Xana had constantly told Jasmine how much she loved her. Her voice breaking over almost every syllable, she added, "I don't know why our time was cut short, but I know that God has a plan." On her Instagram account, Jasmine had posted about some of Xana's writings from her recent English class at the University of Idaho. She had written about a song, Blasé, a remix by the electronic band Louis the Child, whom the music lover had seen in concert. "It is a song I will imagine her dancing to each time I hear it," Jasmine wrote. "Ordered up 100 rosés, need a Benz like a blase, I'm just whipping Maserati," were the lyrics. Boy, I butchered those guys, sorry. Xana, the girl on the body cam footage at King Road, holding her driver's license nervously in her hand for the police, worrying about being under the legal drinking age, even when the police themselves hadn't much cared. Xana, the girl who rarely wore makeup, whose natural blush that summer with Ethan before the murders looked to have come from sunlight and love. Being Instagram and YouTube famous, like the Kardashians, her coach had said about her desires, dreams that were fueled, perhaps, by having survived some difficult circumstances of her childhood. Like so many of her generation, she longed to be seen and acknowledged, an ambition she was carrying into womanhood. On TikTok, in front of the Sigma Chi house, she did a round-off. She did a back handspring and landed on her head, crumpling into herself with something like laughter and pain at the same time while somebody filmed. She wore a wizard's cap, held a magic wand. She did the Running Man dance. She hid under blankets, made monster faces at the camera. According to police documents, Xana's phone had showed that she had been logged into TikTok just before the homicides, at around 4 a.m. Xana had been scrolling, maybe even checking the likes on her latest video. Whatever audience she had had, they of course couldn't have seen what happened to her that night. Like very few things, it wasn't filmed. But after, they certainly could imagine. And Xana's audience was now very big. Her voice carried across the distances. Chapter 56. A few months after Brian Koberger's arrest, Stacy and Jim Chapin set up the Ethan's Smile Foundation to raise money for college scholarships they hoped to provide to students from Saget Valley, where they lived. Helping to fund the foundation was a new venture with their friends at Tulip Valley Farms, who were promoting the Ethan's Smile mix of yellow and white tulip bulbs. The white was for the brilliance of his smile in life, and the yellow symbolized his cheery attitude. Ethan's mother had a video created to promote the foundation. She stood in front of the tulip fields where weeks earlier she had been interviewed on a national TV network with tears in her eyes. Now she wore a lavender-toned hoodie with a screen print of a yellow tulip on the front. "Life without him is tricky," she said of Ethan, the wind tossing her hair. She held a bouquet of tulips in her arms as if holding on to her son. Some of the proceeds of their family foundation would also go to the University of Idaho for its own scholarship purposes. Stacy and Jim's organizational skills seemed to offer them a pathway through grief. They had no illusions that they would get to the other side of that grief anytime soon, if ever. They just understood that sinking into it could make it worse. They forced themselves to embrace a positive attitude given the nightmare they were living through. As difficult as it was, we try to stay way over in our happy lane, Stacy says. Wake up every morning, put your best foot forward under really shitty conditions. To that end, Jim and Stacy had granted very few interviews and had stayed away from the media spotlight as much as possible, other than to promote the foundation. When they did briefly open the doors for that reason, they were bombarded. "We agreed to talk to some press," she says, planning a brief event for a few regional outlets that she and Jim felt comfortable talking with. Little did we know every single news organization flew to the farm because they knew we were going to be here. She and her husband also had film companies chasing after them, hoping to lock down production rights to the Chapin family story. It was overwhelming. We had a producer fly out the other day, she says. We have people coming that are Emmy Award nominated. I don't know what to make of that. It doesn't change the outcome. The Chapins had hired a public relations gatekeeper to shield them, and they were making every effort, she says, to take the high road through their suffering. That included not hanging on to anger at the person in custody, Brian Koberger, or to whoever might be convicted of having taken their son's life. We're not going to the trial, she says. I don't care about the outcome. A guilty verdict wasn't going to bring Ethan home to their family, and it was a family that still needed her and Jim to be emotionally healthy if they were going to thrive. Our two kids have had a rough road, but they get to be kids and they get to have lives and educations and families and children, Stacy says. We have to move forward. It hadn't been easy. The initial weeks had nearly crushed her and Jim's souls. One day I was out walking by myself, she told a Fox News reporter in one of her rare interviews to promote the family's tulip venture. I was crying so hard. I happened upon somebody and I thought they were going to call 911 on me. Now she had reconnected with her purpose as a mother, as a wife, and as a citizen. Their family motto had always been, go big or go home, and the family had found a way to adhere to that. By spring, their foundation had sold over $200,000 in merchandise from their tulip operation, including 83,000 bulbs, 1,300 Ethan's Smile sweatshirts, and 750 fresh-cut bouquets of the blend that had been named after their son. Their daughter Maisie had recently been named the sweetheart of Sigma Chi, the fraternity Ethan had been a member of and their brother Hunter still was, an honor that meant Maisie was now officially allowed to wear the Sigma Chi letters if she chose to. The fraternity, as well, had recently established a scholarship fund in honor of the memory of Ethan Chapin, who entered Chapter Eternal on Sunday, November 13th, in Moscow, Idaho, said its donations page, which had quickly raised $125,000, a hefty $100,000 beyond its original goal. Maisie posed for a photograph in front of her brother's brothers. She wore a light blue dress and a heart-shaped charm around her neck. She clutched a bouquet of red and pink roses. Hunter was in the photograph too. All of them were smiling like Maisie. All of them were her brothers as well now. A few dozen young men who had her back, moving into the future. The only brother missing was the one Hunter and Maisie had spent 9 months in the womb with, their heartbeats in sync, and the following 20 years beside. It would be brutal getting used to Ethan's absence from their photos, but Maisie and Hunter had their own lives to think about too. Somehow they would just have to. Their mother had a way. She tried to think about it. We'll still be a great family, Stacy says. It'll just be 4 of us and a memory now. That concludes episode 13 of While Idaho Slept. Make sure you subscribe if you're new here so you can go into the playlist and start the book from the beginning if you'd like. Thank you for listening and appreciate all your support in this new series, Cry Me to Sleep. Until next time, good night.